Have you ever been a part of something or seen something where your just mouth dropped? You went like this. You were in awe of just what happened. We were fortunate yesterday. We kept our grandson all day, which was a good distraction if you get my drift. Anyway, so with our grandson, and he has two things regularly that he alternates before playing at our house. Cars and then balls. That goes back and forth between them. All right, and he says the word car like 100 times a day. But he was with the balls yesterday. For the first time, he's been playing with these balls for a lot, usually throwing them here and there. But yesterday, for whatever reason, he started throwing them and they started bouncing. And as he would throw them, his mouth would like this. It would gape open, his mouth, like this. As he would throw the ball and see it bounce, it's like, I caused it to bounce. I mean, it's not almost like it was. He was in awe of the fact that as he threw the ball, it bounced and bounced, and that mouth would just be dropped open, all right? And this feeling of awe, I want you to catch this. The feeling of awe, there's a great definition. Awe is the feeling that comes when we're in the presence of something so vast or profound that it transcends our understanding of the world. It forces us to change our assumptions and accommodate the new information. All right, let's repeat that. We'll go back and change and do that. Awe is the feeling that comes when we're in the presence of something so vast or profound, it transcends our understanding of the world, and it forces us to change our assumptions and accommodate the new information. So it's almost like as my grandson was throwing that ball, he got this new information. This was profound. A ball will actually bounce, or I'm actually causing that. I'm not sure what was going through his mind, what was transcending his mind, but he was processing this new information, and he was making assumptions and had new assumptions now because he was able to bounce this ball and see it happen. And many of us have I think in this room, there's a number of you who have traveled and go different places. I bet you've been to some places that would make you go, wow, that your mouth would drop and you go, that is amazing, right? Some of those places, I'm going to show you a picture of them, and some of you have been there before, all right? Some of you, has anybody ever seen the Northern Lights before? Aurora Borealis. Anybody ever seen that? Sure. Thank you, Mr. Michael. All right. So Mike, was it like an awe moment when you were there? Yeah. So somebody's been out there. So when you go out there and see this in person, I can imagine you're like, I can't believe what I'm looking at, right? Or some of you probably have been here to the Grand Canyon. And maybe some of you weren't like Clark Griswold and go, let's go. You know, maybe you didn't do that. But when you looked at it, you couldn't believe what you were seeing. And your mouth would literally drop open because of the vastness and then this awesome thing that you're seeing, and it transcends of how you understand the world just seeing this. And then probably more of you probably been to Niagara Falls, right? And just seeing the huge amounts of water coming over, whether you're on the Canada side or the U.S. side or whatever, just seeing this massive fall of water come down. And particularly if you go, I would imagine if you go during the cold winter and there's ice formations and all around this, it would even be much cooler. But just seeing things like the Grand Canyon and Niagara Falls, it does change the way you see things, the way you see the world. Now, I'm pretty sure that my wife's brother and his family have been out to California and have probably been around one of these suckers. But I can't imagine standing next to one of the redwood trees without going, I can't believe this. That would be an awe moment, I would believe, if I was there standing at the base of one of those giant suckers. Now, many of us have seen this next picture. We've grown up studying all about the earth and the universe and all this other stuff. We've seen a picture similar to this. But very few of us actually saw it in person. Astronauts will tell you when they go out and they're looking out of their spacecraft and looking back at the Earth, it literally will transcend their understanding of the world, and they will tell you that. They will tell you that they no longer see themselves as, and of course I'm thinking about mostly of American astronauts. They no longer think of themselves just as Americans, but they see themselves as part of humanity. It changes their assumptions, and they have to accommodate this new information when they view it like this, right? Now, none of these others, these that I've showed you, I've never been to any of these, seen any of these. But what I have done outside of my townhouse in Kentucky years ago, when I was in grad school, it was one night I was sitting out, just chilling out. It was late, Again, I was young and single, so I had nothing better to do. So I'm just sitting out back in my townhouse, middle of a city called Cynthiana. So there was a lot of light pollution around, but still not enough to obscure my vision of the sky. And so I'm looking up, and I'm looking, and it was one of those nights. I'm not sure what was going on in my life at the time. Outside, I was in grad school. I was working at a church. I was probably dating my now wife. I think that, but I can't remember technically what year this was. But I remember what was going on inside my house, in my townhouse. I was listening to music. And as I was sitting out there, this song was playing. I'm just going to play you a part of it.
Well, sometimes I look above me when the stars are shining, and I feel so small. How could the God of heaven and all creation know I'm here at all? But then in the silence he whispers, my child, I created you too, and you're my most precious creation. I even gave my son for you, and his eyes are always upon you.
As I was listening to that song, and as I was looking at the stars up above, it really just transcended my understanding that in this universe, God knows I'm here. God knows I'm here, and God is with me. And I still have that same feeling today. In fact, when we moved right at the beginning of the pandemic, we went out and there was no light pollution at all in our house, except for one security light. So I can go to the opposite end of the house on one of these clear nights, and the skies just open up. And I can see clearly the stars and the universe and all the lights and stuff. I can see that clearly. And it still comes to me on those nights when I walk out right before going to bed, and it's clear, and literally it's lighting up the house too. And walking out there and just understanding I have to change my assumptions, because this great big universe that I'm looking at in the midst of this, the one that created all this knows me. Knows me. And it's in that moment that I'm awestruck. For me, I'm awestruck in that moment. And that's why we're calling this series Awestruck. Could we have called it Awe? Yeah, but then it's just a whole lot cooler to call it this, right? That's just a whole lot cooler. Can you imagine? Come to Awe at Covenant. Oh, that's what you'll think. I don't know if I will or not. Awestruck? Yeah, that sounds a whole lot better. So I think I will do that. But really what we're talking about is the first three letters. We're really talking about being struck by awe. And as much as some of these things that I've already showed you that make us go awe, it's amazing that there are people that will tell you that they are awestruck by stuff that we may think are a little more mundane, like the changing of the leaves in the fall, or a stranger giving food, their own food, to a homeless person. Or they're in awe of the perfection of the gymnast when they finish their routine. There were in fact some people who, I guess they were trying to figure out what to do for a research project, so they came up with a study on awe. Literally, people can research anything, right? So they're researching on awe, and they came to this conclusion that if we experience more awe in our daily lives, catch this, if we experience more awe in our daily lives, we become less stressed, we are healthier, we are happier, we are more connected to those around us, and we're more willing to sacrifice for others. I thought wouldn't that be great for us? Wouldn't that be great if we could experience less stress, that we are healthier, that we are connected to others, we're able to sacrifice more for others, we're happier. Wouldn't that be great? Because the season that we're in is really not geared to that. Because the season we're in, we're geared to having more stress. It's self-induced, but we're geared toward it because we are doing our best to make sure we don't miss the office parties, to make sure we don't miss this party or that party. We're making sure we have to get the right gifts for everybody. We have to get the decorations up. We got to make sure we're not the only dark house on the street. Everybody else is decorating, so we better decorate too. I rode around last night and I said, man, I'm way behind. I don't have any lights up. I got one wreath. Well, I don't. My wife has one wreath on the door. So all I got. We're behind. And we were talking about we're going out of town next weekend, and when we're going to have time to do this, we're keeping the grandson again. We're stressing out over Christmas decorations. We're always stressing out over Christmas decorations, all right? So here's the deal. If we're supposed to, if it's in fact true, this study, that if we can experience awe more in our daily lives and we become less stressed, we're healthier, happier, more connected, we're sacrificing for others, then we want to help you out. We want to help you out. We want you to participate with us in these 4 weeks together. And our hope is that you will experience awe at least one time a week when you come here. Now, no, we're not going to bring a big redwood tree for you to look at. That's not going to happen. But we hope that in God's story that we're sharing with you, that you'll be able to get a sense of awe in that story. The awe of how he came to be with us, how the awe of what he did for us. And we hope within this story you become awestruck. And just like the definition, that we be willing to change the way we think. We accommodate this information. We accommodate and change our assumptions just a little bit. Where did this idea of God coming to earth in person come from? Where did that idea come from? God coming to earth in person. Well, it actually was born out of a horrible time for the nation of Judah. The nation of Judah. Now, a quick history lesson. God's chosen people. You remember, we think of Israel. Well, Israel split, became the northern kingdom was still called Israel, but then they had the northern kingdom called Judah. That's where Jerusalem was. And so at the time we're looking in just a little bit in the book of Isaiah, and in this time, Judah, which was, I think it was the smaller of the two. I think the majority of the people of the tribe stayed in Israel, and the smaller went to Judah. I just went to grad school for 5 years. I don't remember all this stuff. All right, so And that was a long time ago. That was 87 to 92. So I forgot all that stuff. So, all right. Anyway, she had two of God's people, Israel and Judah. Judah was ruled by a guy named King Ahaz. And Israel and another country, Syria, were not happy with Judah. And so there was animosity, and Israel and Syria were teaming up against Judah. And so here King Ahaz was facing these folks. He knew that they weren't happy. They knew that they were going to come against him. So this was a difficult time. This was a tough time for the nation of Judah. All right? And here's the deal. I hope you know this. Sometimes you have to go through tough times to get to the good times. Sometimes we have to go through rough patches in order to experience the good patches. And I think we understand that. We have, and God's people, this happened to God's people regularly. If you read the Old Testament, this was a regular occurrence for God's chosen people. Hey, there's going to be some tough times, but when you get through the tough times, there's going to be good times. Regular occurrence. Regular occurrence. God's chosen people had rough times and they experienced good times. Okay? In America, we call these people Auburn fans. All right, so this was going on. This was going on. King Ahaz was a bad king. And pure and simple, he was not going to be on anybody's list of top 10 kings in the Old Testament. He was tough. Difficult time for Judah. And he was a bad king because he didn't believe in God. He could care less about God. And he was leading his nation, a people of God's own chosen people. He was leading them away from God. Yet, here's what God wanted to do. So Ahaz has this issue with these two kingdoms going to attack him. And God sent a message. He said, listen, Ahaz, here's what I want to give you a sign. If you would just ask Ahaz, I will give you a sign. That's all you got to do, Ahaz. Ask, and I will give you a sign to prove that I am willing and able to be with you, to provide for you, and to protect you and your country. If you just ask for a sign. You may think things are bleak right now, Ahaz, but guess what? It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. You just believe in me when you have nowhere else to turn, truthfully. Just believe in me. Understand I'm your God. But all you got to do is ask for a sign. Now, I hope you can catch what's going on here. All right, so we have a king who doesn't believe in God, a king who is turning away from God, and God takes a step toward him. Say, I want to do this for you. Can you catch the significance of this? That we have a God who is willing to take a step toward those who don't even care about him. That is the God of the creator of the universe. When you look at the stars and understand who he is, that's who he is. That changes my assumptions, does it not? You. Of who he is. That sort of transcends my understanding. Wait a second, you're talking about a God who is willing to take a step toward a believer, a non-believer, a person who doesn't have anything to do with him. He's willing to take that step. That's the God we serve. And you may be in here today, you may be watching online somewhere, just happenstance, and you're just maybe you came today with family members because they asked you to come. And they're sitting with you, hey, we got donuts and coffee. You want to come? Yeah, I'll come. I got some donuts, all right? Or you may be somebody that's simply forgotten about God. Did you put God on the back burner? Or you have said, I just don't want to fool with God. Maybe somebody in this room is in that boat. But the God of the universe is willing to take a step towards you, even when you don't care about him. That is the God. That should transcend your understanding. It should challenge you to change your assumptions and to accommodate this new information. So Ahaz said, no, I don't want a sign. But here's what God did. Used Isaiah. Isaiah said, hear now, you house of David, is it not enough to try the patience of human? Will you try the patience of my God also? Therefore, the Lord himself will give you a sign. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son and will call him Emmanuel, which for those of us who have been in church a long time means God with us. He will be eating curds, and we usually stop there, but we're going to go on and read the rest of this. He will be eating curds and honey when he knows enough to reject the wrong and choose the right. For before the boy knows enough to reject the wrong and choose the right, the land of the two kings you dread will be laid waste, the kings Israel and Syria. The Lord will bring on you and your people and on the house of your father a time unlike any since Ephraim, another name of Israel, broke away from Judah. He will bring the king of Assyria. That's who Ahaz actually wanted to get help from, the king of Assyria. So remember that last phrase, the king of Assyria. So here's the deal. The stage is set for God to show himself. The stage is set for God to go out of his way to provide and protect his people. But the king of Judah is in charge, and the people follow the king. It's always that way, right? When you have a leader, particularly kings and those kingdoms, people will follow the king come hell or high water. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the king says. It doesn't matter what the king does. It doesn't matter what the king believes. The people will follow. So they get the good, the bad, the indifferent, and the nations will rise and nations will fall depending on the quality of their leader. And it happens regularly. Because leaders come and go, nations rise, and nations fall. And we've seen even Christian leaders go through the same thing. They rise and fall. And it's so heartbreaking when they do. Because the kingdom of God's worse for it. I love what Albert Einstein said. He said, there are only two ways to live your life. One is though nothing is a miracle. The other is though everything is a miracle. And Ahaz was one of those kings who was living as if nothing was a miracle. There's no God. There's only me, myself, and I. If I don't take charge, it won't happen. If I don't do it, it won't happen. It won't get done. See, he is one of those guys, those kings, that is trusting what he can see, what's right in front of him. And what's right in front of him is two nations trying to attack him, and he sees a third option, Assyria, as somebody that may help. So Ahab is actually trusting an enemy in Assyria. You see, when we can't trust God, when we can't trust God, it makes sense to trust our worst enemy. When we can't trust God, it makes sense to trust in ourselves. When we can't trust God, we're open to anything and everything. We'll believe anything. If we can't trust in God, we're open to trust anything and everything, and we'll be simply like the song from Kansas. We'll be dust in the wind. We'll follow along wherever the prevailing wind takes us. John Wesley says, if a man will not believe God, he will believe anything. He will believe anything. Ahaz didn't want a sign from God. He believed the Assyrians would be his help. But when you read history, here's what you find out. That help cost the nation their freedom. 70 years in captivity in Assyria. So Ahaz didn't want a sign, but God gave him a sign anyway. He gave him a sign anyway. And then at the end he said, sorry, but you ain't going to be around to see it. It is very tempting for us to fall into the Ahaz mode. It really is, particularly when everything that we pay attention to, everything that we read, everything that we watch never challenges us to live our lives as if it is a miracle, to live our lives that there is a God. Everything points away from that. Everything that we spend our time watching, listening to, and reading, for the most part, is not going to tell us that life is a miracle, and is not going to tell us that we need to believe in God. Just the opposite. And I hope that you understand that we are in a post-Christian society. That we are in a post-Christian society. There's people my age and older, 30 and older. No. Mid-50s and older. Most of us remember our federal or our national leaders, for the most part, were God-fearing people who believe in the principles of the Bible. We remember for the most part, majority of our state leaders were God-fearing people, believed in the principles of the Bible. Our community leaders, God-fearing people, believed in the principles of the Bible. Not so anymore. Not so anymore. You can't say that anymore for the most part. And could I sit here and be like grumpy old man and complain about the good old days, type thing? Could I do that? Yes, I could, but it'd be a waste of time. I'm not going to lament about what used to be. Because where we are now, it's okay. Because when I look at history, when I look at the history of God's people that sold out their hearts and lives to God, that sold out their hearts and lives to Jesus, they had the world against them. And they thrived. I actually think you can find plenty of examples of when people did not, when people did not have it tough, they didn't thrive. So I think that it's actually better for God's people to have a little adversity in their lives, because that actually causes us to what? Rely on God. And we thrive. And we thrive. What's our definition? Part of our definition of all. It changes our assumptions and accommodates new information. There's 4 million babies born into the world, or born in the U.S. every year. And we're going to take 4 more weeks to talk about one. We're going to single out one baby born 2,000 years ago in the Middle East. What's the big deal about this one? Why are we making a big deal about a baby born to probably a 14-year-old girl in somewhere in the Middle East 2,000 years ago? Because we were told it was going to happen 700 years before it did. We were told it was going to happen 700 years before it did. God gave us a sign. God gave us a sign. A young girl giving birth to a baby. God's son, his name, God with us. God with us. What he wanted to do for Ahaz was let him know this. This is really what God wanted to do for Ahaz. He said, hey, bud, if you just look to me, if you believe in me, I will be with you. That's what God wanted to do. That was the sign that God wanted to give Ahaz. If you just look to me, believe in me, I will be with you. Ahaz looked somewhere else. What about us? Isaiah 9:2 says, the people walking in the darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. And we read this, and we've heard this probably many times. in the past if we've attended church regularly during the month of December and during the Advent season. And we understand that light is Jesus. We understand that. The light we're talking about is Jesus. But I want to challenge you to think about light for a second. Because what I want for us to happen is to be awestruck during these times together, and to be awestruck to the point where the light comes on inside of us. And that this Christmas time will be more about Jesus and not about busyness and getting the right presents. You see, God set this stage 700 years before Jesus came. And now the lights are on. The stage is set, it's shining brightly. When you look at the stage, what do you see? What do you see? If you can see the awe in the moment, if you can see the awe in the fact that God is with us, then I hope it will force you to change your assumptions and accommodate some new information and change the way we live our lives. Let's pray. God, open our eyes. Help us to see awe every day. God, open our eyes. Help us to be awestruck by what you are doing around us. Help us to be in awe of what you're doing in us. And may we constantly be awestruck that you are with us. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Hope you'll come back and join us next week. Dr. McKay will be bringing part 2 of the series, Awestruck. And I hope that you will be awestruck, not just in the Sundays, but in the days ahead. Go in peace.